The Point with Greta Van Susteren. Probing the mind of a parent accused of killing her children. The early warning signs that were missed. What her family could have done but didn't. Our Point. Mentally competent? What the Andrea Yates medical records say. And what a jury will rule this week. Plus, staying silent but staying loyal. Carolyn Condit's dilemma. Our Point panel includes former Congresswoman Patricia Schroeder and Cosmo girl Helen Gurley Brown. The Point. Now, from Washington, Greta Van Susteren.
Her husband has spoken out. Both of her children have also spoken out. But Carolyn Condit, the wife of Congressman Gary Condit, has remained silent. She also has remained by her husband's side, provoking a nationwide discussion about loyal wives and roving husbands. Tonight's Flashpoint, faithfully yours. Joining me here in Washington is Amy Holmes, whose commentary on Mrs. Condit appeared last Friday in USA Today. Also here in Washington is former Colorado Congresswoman Pat Schroeder. And in New York is author and Cosmopolitan International Editor-in-Chief Helen Gurley Brown. Congresswoman Schroeder, first to you. Is this any of our business, whether a woman stands by her man's side, specifically in politics?
You know, I don't think it is. I really think we're one of the very few countries where we really get out there and expect this, and I don't know why. We don't expect it of men. Men don't necessarily have to support their spouse when they're out there. And I really feel sorry for the spouses because I think anything they do, it's wrong. If they show up and support them, everybody says, oh, how could she do that? If they don't show up and support them, everybody says, oh, how could they do that? I think the real issue is the person who did the contact. And we ought to be looking at the person who did the conduct, and their private lives and their marriage and all of that ought to be dealt with somewhere else, and they shouldn't be treating families as props.
Amy, let me take a tip from Congresswoman Schroeder, looking at the person whose conduct brought us to the discussion. Is it demeaning only to the man? People oftentimes talk about how demeaning or humiliating it is to the woman when the man cheats in politics.
Well, when it's such a public case, I mean, clearly the person who was engaging in the infidelity has gotten quite a lot of attention for his behavior, but clearly it's also important to the Condits that she appear with him. She appeared on the cover of People magazine in the Connie Chung interview. She was seen strolling along with him, so it was important to the congressman's family that they give the appearance of a unified marriage. And if you remember, he said more than once that he's been a married man for 34 years and he's made his mistakes. I think in the case of Carolyn Condit, though, she's crossed the line from being a victim to an enabler. And in Talk magazine, Lisa DiPaolo reports that Carolyn Condit actually suffered a nervous disorder that flares up when she learns about her husband's cheating. So at which point is it, you know, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame, excuse me, the other way around, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me.
Helen Gurley Brown, is Carolyn Condit an enabler? Is she a victim, or has she become a prop?
I think maybe she's all of those things. Most men and women have some kind of understanding that one of them cheats or both of them cheats or nobody cheats, and obviously this recent contretemps with him isn't the first time, so maybe through the years she has been an enabler, but that's up to each individual wife whether she will permit her husband to cheat. It couldn't go on in my house, but in her house she was used to it. It just got to be really ugly and horrible and unacceptable when this poor girl disappeared, and that puts a different light on things. To repeat, I think Carolyn Condit had maybe even an unspoken agreement with her husband that he could go out and do whatever he did with all those girls, but it's only gotten into really horrible, sharp focus because of the disappearance of Chandra Levy.
Congressman Schroeder, I mean, what is a woman? I mean, what are you supposed to do in these instances? I mean, we know, everyone has so many expectations about whether Carolyn Condit, is an enabler or a victim or whatever. What's she supposed to do?
I think that's why I almost feel guilty sitting here talking about this. It's very hard to know what's going on in her mind. This has to be very painful. It has to be publicly humiliating that this is all out there, and I'm sure she has tremendous
Why is it humiliating to her? I mean, apparently her conduct has been exemplary. At least we've heard nothing. I mean, why should she be the humiliated one?
Well, maybe humiliation is the wrong word, but she's also a mother, and she has a young daughter, and I can't help but think that she wouldn't be thinking how terrible she would feel if that had happened to her daughter, and here it is, it's her husband. I mean, think of how you must feel. And in the interim, I'm sure, because many times before she's had to wink at things he's done in the marriage to keep the marriage viable, she probably really cares very much about sustaining the marriage. So if she's really trying to sustain the marriage, everybody says, oh, well, you know, why is she doing that? She's an enabler. And yet, how can you work these things out in public? I don't know how you could work those things out in public. They're hard enough in marriages to work out in private. So well, I think Helen makes a real good point.
I would agree with that, and nobody knows what goes on inside a marriage, but unfortunately in this case, we kind of do. And for them to be working it out in public, one of the things that Mrs. Condit could have done is to come forward publicly to speak about, you know, in maybe some sort of shaded terms about how difficult this has been.
Well, why
but
should
that
she?
her focus.
Amy,
well,
why should she? Why does she didn't know it to us? We didn't elect her.
Well, we didn't elect Carolyn Condit, but we did elect Gary Condit, who has now been caught in this scandal involving his infidelity, which apparently he's a voracious womanizer, what we've learned about him. I mean, the magnitude is really rather unusual, and Carolyn Condit has for 34 years allowed this to continue and possibly mushroom, including interns in Washington. So the question is, what responsibility does she have for some of the behavior that apparently she was allowing go on?
Helen, do you think she has any responsibility?
No, I think they had, as I said, an unspoken or spoken agreement that he could go on being a womanizer and have affairs and flings.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second. Just let me stop you. I hate to interrupt you, but what do you mean that you think that they had an unspoken agreement? What leads you to that? Because I sort of have the impression that he was off doing his dalliances and keeping them rather secret.
I just say in most marriages, you know whether your husband cheats or doesn't cheat. He knows whether you do or not. And you may not even talk about it, you just know. So in Carolyn Condit's marriage, she had knowledge of his doing what he has been doing for a long time, in my opinion. Is she an enabler? Maybe, but I don't think of it in those terms. It only gets out of hand when your whole family is involved, and now it's such a public spectacle that her children are indeed out there in the limelight as well. But both of them have spoken up really on behalf of their father. So are they enablers? Well, put under those ground rules, perhaps so.
But getting back to Carolyn Condit, the fact that her husband is in public life does mean that her attitude toward their marriage and his conduct and his infidelity is important, because it becomes public and it becomes something that can be embarrassing for the family. We've now seen that the two children have suffered professionally. We have to assume they've suffered emotionally as well, but they had to resign their jobs. Chad Condit is said to, have a very dim political future now that his last name is Condit. I mean, there have been serious consequences.
I tell you, Amy, I think voters are a little smarter than that, and they think that the conduct was the congressman's alone. I would find it very hard to believe. I'd be very disappointed in the voters if they assigned his father's conduct to him. Congressman Schur, let me just switch gears a little bit before we run out of time. So, pressure on political spouses. Is there a difference between the pressure on women's spouses as opposed to male spouses?
There's huge differences, huge differences. I mean, that is really where the gender is not equal when it comes to that. I could go on for 4 hours about this, but you think about it, women are always supposed to support their spouse. And we can remember during when Elizabeth Dole was running, to say that Bob Dole was the doting, always there, always supporting. Remember, he made comments about how he'd sent checks to John McCain and all sorts of other things. Had she done that, the national media would have said, that's just shocking. How could she not be out there supporting her husband? They didn't really say that when it was in reverse. Now, hopefully when she announces tomorrow, he will be there and he will be more supporting. But I think you would find in instance after instance after instance, the men are given much more leeway.
We have 20 seconds left. Helen, you want to get in before we have to go to break?
Well, I just want to say that a political wife has more responsibility. Every president of the United States has probably had a girlfriend, with the exception of maybe Harry Truman, and we haven't excoriated those women. Eisenhower, certainly Kennedy. I don't know about, we know about Clinton, of course, not about Carter. So I don't think these women should be excoriated because they have put up with some infidelity. That sort of goes with the territory, it seems, in political life.
Well, I'd like to jump in.
Amy, with that, I'm sorry, I've got to cut you off. We've got to take a break. Amy Holmes, Helen Gurley Brown, and Congressman Pat Schroeder, thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Thank you.
We looked into her eyes on the day her children were drowned and on the days she has been in court. In a minute, we will look into her mind and ask whether Andrea Yates is mentally competent to stand trial.
Business as you've known it is history. We're in a brave new world with more information than you've ever seen. And if you're not part of it, you're part of the past. How do you unlock its potential? With EMC. EMC opens the door to all your information. It's the one place where you can see your information from every place. EMC, where information lives.
In the global energy business, no one covers more ground than the fast cats. Conoco, think big, move fast.
Oh, say, can I have the new software IT didn't approve? Fred, I promised someone remote access. What is remote access?
At CDW, we understand what it can be like in IT. That's why we have top name brands in stock, so you get the solutions you need when you need them. Like the HP NetServer LP2000R, great performance and manageability, and a 2U rack-optimized server, only from HP.
Fred, here is another request that can't be done in time.
HP and CDW, computing solutions built for business.
Yesterday, allergies took you out of it. Today, Allegra can help bring you back. Only Allegra has fexofenadine for once daily relief for people 12 and older. Side effects include headache, upper respiratory tract infection, and back pain. Call your doctor now for more information. Allegra, enjoy your world.
He says he talks to the dead. Skeptics say no way. Can he really speak to the other side? An extraordinary hour with renowned psychic John Edward. He'll take your calls. Coming up next on Larry King Live.
She told police she was a bad mother and her children were, quote, hopelessly damaged. So she killed them. This week, a Texas jury will have to decide whether Andrea Yates' mind is hopelessly damaged and whether she is mentally competent to stand trial for murder. They will base that decision in part on hundreds of pages of Andrea Yates' medical records. They were made public at the end of last week, and here is CNN's Ed Levendera.
In 1999, the Yates family had dreams of living in a modified RV. They spent part of the year living in a converted bus, 2 adults, 4 kids, 350 square feet, fully equipped with a kitchen and bunk bed. The bus was still parked on the side of the Yates home the day Andrea was arrested for drowning her 5 children. But in the summer of 1999, the quiet mother started 2 years of treatment for depression, which eventually spiraled into postpartum psychosis. According to court records, on June 17, 1999, Andrea Yates tried to commit suicide, taking almost 50 antidepressant pills which belonged to her father. The next day, she entered Baylor Methodist Hospital in Houston. She told doctors she, quote, wanted to sleep forever and wanted to die. Doctors say Andrea Yates shared little personal information and spent most of the day staring out the window. About 1 week later, medical records show Andrea was discharged because of insurance restrictions, although records don't clarify what the restrictions were. Andrea was put on antidepressant medication, and Russell Yates, her husband, agreed to watch his wife around the clock. Andrea apparently didn't like the medication. Russell told doctors she would flush the pills down the commode. 1 month later, July 23, 1999, Russell Yates finds Andrea holding a steak knife to her throat. He says he had to force it out of her hand and that it left a mark on her neck. The next day, she's taken to a psychiatric hospital where she tells doctors she wanted to kill herself, saying, quote, I had a fear I would hurt somebody. I thought it better to end my own life and prevent it. Andrea says she's been hearing voices and seeing images since the birth of her first child, but never paid attention to it. During that second hospital stay, Andrea says she started feeling anxious and depressed after the birth of their 4th child, Luke. She says she worries about her children and can't sleep at night. She's barely eating and barely communicating with people. A few weeks into the treatment on August 9, 1999, Andrea says she started losing her identity when she became a stay-at-home mother. At this point, she's taking a cocktail of medications, including the powerful antipsychotic medicine called Haldol. On August 10, 1999, Andrea is allowed to go home at nights in return for daily counseling. She tells a group therapy session that, quote, she enjoys watching caterpillars grow and turn into butterflies. 3 days later, doctors say husband Russell is putting pressure on Andrea to leave the mental hospital. Russell Yates tells doctors the family has plans of homeschooling the oldest child, Noah, and that they hope to have more children. A doctor writes, quote, apparently patient and husband plan to have as many babies as nature will allow. This will surely guarantee future psychotic depression. On August 20th, 1999, Andrea Yates is allowed to leave the psychiatric hospital. Doctors say her condition is better, but no one says she's completely cured. For the next 2 years, Andrea Yates would remain at home, receiving private therapy along the way. The Yates family would settle into a suburban Houston home near the NASA Space Center. But in November of 2000, the family's fifth child is born, and in March of this year, Andrea's father passes away. Those two events would trigger another severe round of depression and psychosis. On March 31, 2001, Russell Yates brings Andrea to the Devereaux Treatment Center. He says she could not have survived another night at home. Andrea is sleeping 1 to 2 hours a night. She has stopped eating and won't take medications. 3 days later, Dr. Mohammed Saeed says Andrea, quote, presents a substantial risk of serious harm to herself and or others if not immediately restrained. Andrea tells doctors that she is not a good mother, but she won't respond when asked if she's thinking of committing suicide. 2 weeks later, on April 12th, Andrea Yates shows enough improvement that she's allowed to go home at nights. But she abandons the drugs doctors have prescribed. On May 4th, Andrea becomes less energetic, not eating again. She returns to the hospital where doctors increase medication of Wellbutrin and Effexor. Russell Yates tells doctors his mother found Andrea in a bathroom with the bathtub filled with water, but she was unable to explain what she was doing. Andrea is put back on the antipsychotic medication Haldol. By May 13th, Andrea is sleeping better and eating. She's participating in group therapy. She says she's going to work on her negative self-image. On May 22nd, less than 2 months after a doctor described Andrea as a serious danger, she was allowed to go home with her husband. 29 days later, 2 years of suicidal impulses turned homicidal. Ed Lavendera, CNN, Houston.
Join me to discuss Texas laws on mental competency and the Andrea Yates case are Tarrant County Assistant District Attorney Alan Levy, who is in Fort Worth, and in Houston is former Texas prosecutor Nelda Luce Blair, who is now on the legal staff of the TV program Power of Attorney. Alan, first to you, explain the difference between competency to stand trial and the insanity defense.
Well, competency to stand trial requires a defendant to show that he doesn't have a rational as well as factual understanding of the proceedings against him, or that he's unable to assist his attorney in his defense. Insanity is a defense to criminal conduct, and in Texas we applied the old McNaughton rule, which is a right-wrong test. If the defendant knew the difference between right and wrong, he's not insane under Texas law.
Nelda, you know, in this case, this woman had a long history of attempts at seeking some sort of help, and apparently it failed her. At least that would be the allegation when she raised the insanity defense. Is that enough to be successful in insanity defense, that you sought help and you didn't get it, or that psychiatry failed you?
Well, the insanity defense in her murder trial, should she be found competent to stand trial, the insanity defense is really pretty cut and dried in Texas. The question is strictly because of some mental defect or disease that at the time she committed the conduct, she did not know that it was wrong. It's not whether she's tried to help herself.
Does that mean if she were saying, hypothetically, I see pink elephants in the bathroom with me, but I know I shouldn't drown my children? Is that insane or not?
Well, again, that question of the jury is asked is really pretty straightforward. Now, once the jury answers that question, they may want to consider whether or not she's actually tried to get help or needed more help or refused help or quit taking her medicine or whatever when they decide whether to give her the death penalty if they find her guilty.
Alan, she's on a cocktail of drugs over a long period of time. What is the role? Is there any role of drugs in a trial on insanity?
No. The question is strictly her cognitive ability to understand the difference between right and wrong. Whether she sees one elephant, a dozen elephants, or takes a dozen pills, that doesn't answer the question that the jury has to answer.
Nelda, how would you argue this trial? Listening to the piece that Ed just, the setup piece for us, I mean, how as a prosecutor do you argue that she was not insane? What do you focus on?
Well, you focus on the fact that number one, that she does have a history of thinking about killing her children, that she's also partly in those records are worries that she had that she wasn't a good enough mother to bring up her children. And you say, look, this woman knew that her children were innocent young victims, that they were dependent on her, and her whole idea was, well, if I can't handle this, I'll just kill them. I mean,
does that mean she's evil? Does that mean she's evil but sane? Is that to be blunt?
You know, you don't hear many people say anything about Andrea Yates having evil motives because her whole picture in the eyes of the public is a very sympathetic picture. There isn't any question about that. And she's a mother. How can we possibly think that a mother would have evil thoughts? But there are some people, mothers alike, that don't love their children and don't try to keep them from harm like other mothers do.
Alan, what would be your strategy in dealing with this? I mean, when you go through the laundry list of, you know, the woman clearly had a number of problems, attempted suicide, heard voices, barely eating and sleeping, on a cocktail of drugs, had sought psychiatric help, and apparently that didn't help her at all. I mean, how do you as a prosecutor combat that sort of history?
Well, I think you have to make it clear to the jury that there's a distinction between being mentally ill and being insane. And you look at the conduct that she engaged in at the time, you look at the steps that she took, the goal-oriented nature of her conduct in terms of achieving a goal, which was killing her children, and you just have to bring the jury along one step at a time.
Nelda, could you ask for the death penalty in this case?
I could. And the reason is, you know, Texas has the death penalty. It's not whether I think it's right or wrong, it's the law in Texas.
But it's an option, is it not?
It is an option, but it is one of an option to a capital murder. This woman's charged with capital murders, 3 capital murders, 2 capital murders, and 2 others waiting in the wings. If she's found competent to stand trial and she's found that she does not have an insanity defense, I would ask anyone in the nation to name a more horrific crime that would have to be worse than this to require the death penalty.
All right, my thanks tonight to Alan Levy and Nelda Luce Blair, both from Texas.
Thank you.
The natives are getting restless about the Gary Condon story. Some of the email that we can put on the air after a quick break in our Moneyline Update.
I'm Jan Hopkins with this Moneyline Update. A disheartening session after Friday's brutal sell-off. The Dow today barely budged, down less than a point to end at 96.05. The Nasdaq gained, but the rally was less than inspiring. The index rose 7 points to close at 1695. In economic news, consumer credit virtually unchanged in July. Economists expected an increase. That stokes fears that consumers are pulling back on spending. Watch Lou Dobbs' Moneyline at 6 p.m. and 11:30 p.m. Eastern, weeknights on CNN.
When my arthritis started choosing the notes, I thought my jazz days were over. But my doctor said keep moving with Advil. It's strong enough to let me control the pain. That's me playing again.
Take Advil and take control.
When I retired from the police force after 17 years, I bought this newsstand. As I'm setting up shop, Ed shows up. He's with Philip Morris, USA. He tells me about the We Card program, about preventing cigarette sales to minors.
Philip Morris is committed to keeping kids from smoking. That's why Philip Morris USA is a major sponsor of the We Card program.
So when a kid tries to buy some smoke,
can I get a bag of cigarettes too?
He's not getting past me.
Sorry, I can't say the cigarettes, bro. What?
or anyone who works for me.
Working to make a difference. The people of Philip Morris.
Oh, yes! Yes!
Want happy employees? Help secure their financial futures. At the Principal Financial Group, that's what we do. The Principal is the 401k leader, financial solutions for you and growing businesses. The Principal Financial Group, we understand what you're working for.
Now's the best time to join America Online.
Welcome. The AOL is very easy to use.
Anyone can do it.
You've got mail.
I love AOL email.
Click and send. Everybody I know is on AOL.
I do feel good knowing that AOL has parental controls. I can get AOL anytime, anywhere.
And now with the all-new and improved AOL mobile communicator, you can send and receive email and instant messages without a computer.
Every time I use AOL, I discover something new.
Now's the perfect time to experience America Online. So easy to use, no wonder it's #1. Call 1-800-4ONLINE.
Some look forward to fall for great weather. Bob Costas looks ahead to great sports action. Get his take on everything from Barry Bonds' home run tear to the NFL refs, plus what Bob really thinks about politics and more. On Greenfield at Large, tonight 10:30 Eastern on CNN.
Tonight's final point goes to my viewers. Most of my email today is sympathetic to Congressman Gary Condit. It's pretty colorful, too. Here are 2 quick examples. Can you imagine what if Gary Condit were a Republican with all this garbage that's been going on? He would have been hung out to dry. Here's another viewer's insight. Until he is accused, he is not married to you or me and owes no one else any explanation. I'd like to know what you think about the Gary Condit controversy or the Andrea Yates case. Send an email to askgreta@cnn.com. That's one word, Ask Greta. I'm Greta Van Susteren in Washington. Next, psychic John Edward is Larry King's guest. But you probably already knew that.
BMW Roadsters.
Closed captioning provided by USSearch.com. Let USSearch.com help you locate anyone today. Visit us on the web at USSearch.com or call 1-800-US-SEARCH.
For the interviews you'll never forget, it's Larry King Live next. Then go behind the headlines on CNN Tonight, followed by Greenfield at Large on CNN.
You know, most men get pretty shook up about losing their hair. But today, many of them are learning about Bosley Medical. They use your own living hair to fill in the thin spots. Just look at that. It really works. You can treat it like real hair because it is real hair. Your own naturally growing hair, so you don't have to worry about it.
Bosley Medical is the world's most experienced hair restoration practice. For over 25 years, they have performed more than 130,000 procedures using the innovative micrografting techniques pioneered by founder Dr. L. Lee Bosley.
Each surgeon at Bosley Medical is board certified and individually trained by me.
So if you want to have your own naturally growing hair back, call this number for more information. We'll send you this free video and in-depth guidebook that gives you the real facts about hair restoration. There's no cost and absolutely no obligation. So do it for yourself. Call now and get the real results you've been looking for.
It's your real hair.
You can't do better than real.
Are you one of the millions of American males who would like increased sexual energy? If you've been considering Viagra as a solution, consider something different. All-natural Enerx. Clinical studies show various ingredients of Enerx enhance sexual energy, increasing desire, performance, and satisfaction. Enerx is all natural with no side effects. With Enerx, you'll feel the increased energy within minutes and with no chemicals. We're so sure you and your mate will be completely satisfied. We'll offer you a 30-day, no questions asked, full refund. EnerX stimulates sexual energy by expanding the blood vessels, causing increased blood flow to specific areas of the body. Unleash the power of EnerX now.
Call 1-800-367-7960 toll-free, and it will be delivered discreetly to your home. Get results using the safe, all-natural alternative, EnerX.